Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Puppet Time Online. I'm your host, Eric Wright, and this is brought to you by the Puppet Kitchen. Puppet Time Online is your chance to sit down with some of puppetry's finest and me and hear about what they know about.
That's such a stupid joke, and I laugh at it every time. I don't know why.
Here with me producing the show is Katie. She's off over here. She's going to be watching the show, making sure we catch all of your comments and questions. If you have comments and questions or something you want to say for shout outs for either me or my guest, we're on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. I don't know where Twitch puts their comments, but put them in the comments and Katie will catch them and make sure we get to answer them. I'm super excited for our guest today. He's a super accomplished puppeteer. Has done so many great things, and I've had the pleasure of working with him on a couple of great shows. Most recently on Disney's Beauty and the Beast at the Maltz Jupiter Theater in Florida. He is a Tony and Emmy nominated puppeteer, director, actor, dancer, and producer, an all-around wonderful person, and I'm so excited to have Mr. John Tartaglia on the show today. Hi, John.
Hello! I'm not a dancer, Eric. I'll take it all, but not a dancer. I move well. I'm an actor who moves well.
Well, all right. That's fine. I always like to start an interview with a correction by the guest. That's good. That's good.
There are too many people out there who would be like, dancer. So I feel like I need to correct that right now.
I guess what I meant was that's what they say about you online.
Oh,
I think that it's listed. Yeah, when I was doing some research, I was like, if you Google John Tartaglia, they list
That's why you
dancer.
can't believe Wikipedia. You cannot believe Wikipedia. It's never as accurate as people want it.
That right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Katie's gonna go fix it.
Do. I give you full
Actor
permission to fix that.
Well, I'm so glad to have you on the show. It's really, really nice to see you.
You too.
Yeah. I think we should just jump right in.
All right.
I've got a couple of questions, but I always like to start with asking what got you into puppetry?
100% hands down Fraggle Rock.
Really?
I think like all kids, I watched Sesame Street growing up and Mr. Rogers and several other like regional shows back in the days when people were making regional TV for kids. And so I definitely, had that exposure, but I think I appreciated it as a kid, but I just remember seeing Fraggle Rock for the first time at like 7 or 8 years old. And it was just like a whole world opened up to me, which of course is what the show's all about. But
yeah,
I had this like very visceral, distinct memory of my mom and I were on a road trip and we checked into a motel that had free HBO, which back in the day was a huge deal.
Big deal.
And of course, in the 80s, if you didn't have HBO, you wouldn't have been exposed to Fraggle Rock, really. So,
right.
Unless you lived in Canada or somewhere else. But anyway, and I really remember this like very strong visual of my mom turning on the TV and HBO coming up, and there was Gobo and Moki Fraggle, and just being like, what is this? And just being entranced by it, and totally obsessed from that moment on.
Yeah.
And then when I started putting together, like I got the album of Fraggle Rock and some of the home video stuff, and I was like, there are people who do this, like, and this Jerry Nelson as Gobo and someone performs these characters. They do more than one character, and it was just like this like avalanche from there on of just total puppet obsession.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, but that was the moment. That was like,
yeah, we do it. We have a picture. Oh, look at that.
Yes.
Yes.
That is typical young John Tartaglia. That's actually a red Fraggle doll that I like gutted and turned into a puppet.
I'm like this discarded Kermit Santa on the steps.
I know. There's so much information in this.
I've never seen that until you just pointed that out before. I always look at the other puppets. I've never noticed it.
Get away from me, Kermit. Come here, man.
It's like, I'm doing this is a photo shoot for my red Fraggle gutted doll and whatever puppet that is on my hand. But and then what you don't know is that the hat I'm wearing is a New Kids on the Block tour. My very first concert I went to. I think I'm probably 10 years old there.
I just want you to know, Johnny, that I knew that.
You did?
Yes.
I was
super.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Well, then we would have gotten along because I was super popular in school, as you can imagine, for being both into puppets and New Kids on the Block. Super cool. Not beat up at all. But yeah, so that was, and I mean, that's how I started. Was like, the first puppets I ever made was by like gutting, dolls and turning them into puppets. And then the one on my right hand there, like I was starting to like take socks and modify, like we all do, modify them and add ping pong balls and stuff like that. And then I kind of got into light interest in building. I've never been a builder per se, but yeah, but that's what started it off.
That's really cool.
Oh.
And okay, so the question that I always like to follow up now is now that you're in puppetry, what keeps you in puppetry?
Ooh, good question. Wow, I've never been asked that before. You know what? I think it's the limitlessness of it. If that's a word, I think it is. That I feel like every time we think, oh, we've kind of done something, there's another avenue to take it, and there's another way to add on and expand. Like I think that from a technical point of view, there's animatronics and digital puppetry, and there's all these different avenues that are all because of what you and I are talking on right now, a computer. It's taken that so much further. And then the other side of it, I think it's puppetry. There's a lot of talk about why puppetry is having kind of a renaissance again, and I keep saying I think it's because it's the last magic trick that no one can define, that you can't. It's not, CGI is wonderful. You could do a lot with CGI, but it is very much like, what it is, how it works. It's flat. You don't, even when your eye thinks maybe you're kind of buying it, you are still kind of going, I know that's, in a computer. But with puppetry, it's like, there's still this tangible magic of someone putting on a puppet in front of you and talking, and just with a few simple movements, you just believe it has life. And that's a very hard thing to define. Do you know what I mean? And excuse me, when it works so well. When it doesn't work, it also doesn't work well. But I don't know, I think it's the last kind of magic. We all know how the disappearing act works. We all know how computers work. We don't really understand totally why we believe puppets. So I don't know, I think that's part of it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the first thing that, like, now in between like you gutting your dolls?
Yes. Ruining
Which
them.
sounds weird, but to you and I, totally normal, day to day. And doing this professional now. So just for those of you who don't know, you are one of the youngest cast members on Sesame Street.
Yes.
You joined as an assistant puppeteer, I think at age 16. Is that right?
I did, although I kind of illegally worked my first time when I was 14.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My mom and I were visiting the set of Sesame Street, and they were shooting the 25th anniversary special, Stars and Stripes Forever, Stars and Street Forever, or something like that.
Sure.
And, I was like a kid in a candy shop. It was like my dream come true to be on that set with all these people. And it was a big day because Julia Louis-Dreyfus was there, and I think the other celebrities were there, and all the human cast were there. Like, it was just kind of like the ultimate first time to visit Sesame Street kind of experience. Yeah. And they pulled me in. They were like, yeah, like I did the counts, like right hand. And I think Johnny Kennedy was puppeteering the count. And so he was like the first person I ever assisted and worked with, which is so funny because now, of course, we've done so much together. But it was like my heart was pounding and I couldn't believe it. And of course, like, I wasn't an after member at that point. I didn't have my union card or anything. But anyway, that was my very, very, very first like real thing I did. And then cool. Sesame Street at 16. Yeah. And then
how did you get to that point where they knew, oh yeah, this is a kid that could do right hands?
Well, I really had an amazing stroke of luck. And also I was very persistent, but when I was about 8 years old, I wrote to Jim Henson for the very first time and wrote a very kind of kid honest letter. I'm sure it was probably in Crown, that basically was like, you know, my dream is to work for the Muppets when I graduate high school, and I want to be a puppeteer like you, and you're my hero, and wrote one of those kind of letters. And I got a beautiful signed 8x10 back from Jim, and then through a series of, I kept writing letters, and through a series of crazy events, which take too much time on here to tell, I almost met Jim like 2 times, and the second time ended up being really, really close, and then it ended up not working out. And then of course he passed away, and I was devastated.
Yeah.
And then probably when I was 13, I would say, I wrote to Kevin Clash at Sesame Street.
Yeah.
And just because I was a fan, I didn't know that he at that time was the puppet coordinator. He just wrote like, I love Elmo, I love Baby Dinosaur, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
And he called my mom and was like, you know, we're always looking for new puppeteers. Why don't you come to New York and come see us film? So we went to the shop. I went to the set, I should say. And during one of the breaks, we went to the creature shop, and I got to try on all the puppets, and it was so cool. And then I kind of ballsy asked at, you know, what was I at that point, 14 years old? You know, I think like looking back, I'm like, how ballsy me. But I was like, so like, why did you call me? Like out of everybody, like, because at the time this was like the height of Elmo, right?
Sure.
And he said, I recognized your name. And I was like, huh? And he said, well, Jim mentioned you before. Jim's talked about you.
Huh.
And I was like, and I just remember like the room dropped at that moment. The room dropped out at that moment. And because I was like, Jim Henson said my name. And I guess what it was is that they were always looking at young puppeteers, and they were, you know, Jim was really adamant about fostering the next generations of puppeteers. Yeah. So I guess in writing those letters and being so persistent and constantly writing to Jim, and then almost meeting him a couple of times where he would have been aware, I guess, of my name, possibly. I guess it made Kevin aware of it, and that's really what started that connection. And then what's really kind of cool is that I always held on to that story, and then there was a little part of me as I became an older adult and cynical, and you know, you start to believe that there's, with the world we live in today, you're like, oh, there's no magic left in the world. But I was talking to Jim's former assistant, who's now a big creative executive. Yeah. And I said, you know, I want to tell you the story. And I was like, I just want you to be honest with me. And as I was telling her the story, she said, oh no, she said, I know, Jim, that totally would have happened. I totally believe that would have happened. I totally believe that. So that kind of like gave me a little hope. But anyway, so yeah, it was, but it was really, truly like an amazing lightning strike of events that I think allowed me to stand out enough to be asked to come in and start. And then I had to go through workshops and auditions and send in videos, and you know, you really prove yourself on the set when you're assisting, and it's a lot of hazing and a lot of, it's, you know, I went home in tears a lot, but I'm so thankful for that, because I got to really watch the masters work and sit and just learn.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you get those letters now? I mean, you've had so much notoriety in your career, you know, Tony and Emmy nominated, and you've, you know, done big Broadway shows, and, you know, like, are you in the position now where you get those letters from kids?
Yeah. And I mean, it's really funny because I remember doing Avenue Q was the first time I really kind of, I guess because the show was so, you know, well known and was out there, it was the first time I really was in I was in a position, I guess, where people would want to write a fan letter to me. And I remember getting those and being like, oh, this must have been what it felt like, you know, and I've always felt it's so important to try to keep the you know, the next generation going. That's also why things like this, I think, are so important, because, you know, when I was growing up, you know, the only access I had to anything that told me what it was like to be a puppeteer or what it was like behind the scenes were those like specials that maybe you caught airing on TV, or maybe existed somewhere on home video, or, you know, a book that maybe I could find at the library that was from, you know, 40 years before about how to do puppetry. But the fact that nowadays, you know, this young generation has access to literally every Muppet Show episode, every Fraggle Rock episode, every behind the scenes special, every tutorial, all online. It's so important, I think, to keep that going, you know, yeah, no, I think it's really important to keep the next generation excited about this art, because we're kind of like opera, you know what I mean? Like we're like an art that's super unique and super
Mhm.
small in its community. And if we
Mhm.
don't keep it going amongst ourselves, like it'll just eventually, it won't exist. So we have
Yeah.
to keep it going.
Yeah. That's cool. What, so how did you, nowadays you are not only acting and writing and
Mhm.
performing, puppeteering, you're also producing a lot of work.
Yes. Mhm.
How did you make that? What was that transition like from being, you know, just that kid or being a puppeteer on Sesame Street or like just getting into it for the performance of it and
Mhm.
then transitioning into really like running a business? I mean, I'm in, you know, similar
Yeah.
position. So I'm really curious about what your path on that is.
Well, you know, I mean, again, talk about lightning strike. You know, the real opportunity I had was when I was doing Avenue Q, getting approached to do Johnny and the Sprites on Disney Channel,
Right.
um, which was, you know, literally having a meeting with the president of Disney Channel and look at
Oh,
that,
there,
there's a
there,
visual.
there we go.
There it is. There it is. A much younger, bronzed John Tartaglia. And I mean, literally, I wore so much bronzer on that show; it was hilarious. But no, and I think that was like being thrown into the fire because it was basically I was 25 years old, 26 years old, and it was kind of like, hey, you want your own TV show? Go, and you're
Oh,
not only going to be the face of it, you're also going to executive produce it. And you know, I learned a lot on the job, and I luckily had a lot of I think being on set on Sesame Street for so many years and on other TV shows, and certainly being behind the scenes of so many different theater projects, I had kind of absorbed a lot of what it means to have a collaboration and what it means to, you know, that your job as a producer is not to necessarily even decide everything so much as to just to try to let everyone do the best work they can do and guide the ship a little bit.
hmm.
And I think, you know, you spend your time on. I would spend my time on sets or in different shows, and I would sit there and subliminally think like, well, if I was doing this, what would I do? Or
Mm.
if I was making this choice, what choice would I make? You know,
Mhm.
but always thinking like, so when I'm 70 years old and I win the lottery someday and I have the money to make my own shows,
Right.
never thinking that, you know, 26 or 27 years old, I can't remember how old I was, having my own TV series, you know,
Yeah.
like, so that was the big jump, was Johnny and the
Mhm.
Sprites. And then what I realized is that as much as I love performing, and I really do, getting to create something and getting to have an idea that starts on paper or starts here and then getting to see it actualized is the most rewarding thing in the entire world. I'm sure you feel that way as a designer. It's
Yeah.
just, it's such an exciting thing. And I also kind of felt at the time, you know, when Johnny and the Sprites started anyway, there was no puppetry was like done. Like no one was producing shows with puppets in them really,
Yeah.
except for Sesame Street, of course. But, and I kind of felt like, I was tired of being told you couldn't do something or no. And I wanted to make my own stuff. And I realized that
Mhm.
like, that's the only way that things are going to survive is if we start making our own content.
Right.
So that's really what it's been, but it is different. It is different when there's a, when I started doing Shrek, which is right after Johnny and the Sprites, or kind of
Mhm.
in that same time, I remember the kind of odd relief. I never thought as a performer, you know, doing 8 shows a week on Broadway is exhausting, but I
Mhm.
never thought just having to show up and do my work as a performer would feel relaxing
Uh-huh.
compared to producing a show, you know, which is
Uh-huh.
a 24/7 job. So it definitely made me really appreciate both sides of that equation even more. But yeah, so that's really what it was, is it was really Johnny and the Sprites that kind of launched that part of my career.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And now, I mean, you have a whole production company that is
Yeah.
that you know you get to you know you get to create new projects like like ImaginOcean came out of
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
Which we worked together on.
Yes.
And you know, I'm
Woo,
just
look at
hey, oh my gosh.
that.
This was such a cool show too. Like
Yeah.
you guys approached Puppet Kitchen about co-designing these characters and designing and building all the puppets, and you know it was a really great experience to help develop this something new that also looked very different, which
Yeah.
was really
I was
exciting.
really proud of it. I think it's really funny. It's a show that like people still talk about. Like I still hear from parents who took their kids off Broadway when it was going off Broadway, or people who saw it on the cruise ships. And I
Mm-hmm.
think because of the blacklight and
Mm-hmm.
and just the incredible musical score by the late William Wade. He wrote such
Yeah.
an incredible score for that show, and
Yeah.
I just think people loved it. But you guys built such beautiful puppets for
I mean,
that.
it was a joy to work on. It was also really exciting for us to do. I mean, I kept saying this over and over before ImaginOcean started, was that
Yeah.
I just wanted to build the same thing twice, because we had gotten really good at innovating new things and creating new things, and then you build them once and they're out the door. And I always was craving a chance to like build the same thing over and over. So being able to build that show for multiple cruise ships as well as the off-Broadway production was really great. But I'm interested how you decide what projects to tackle, or how you decide to what projects to produce, and sort of say, oh, this is one that's going to be like a John Tartaglia Productions show, or this is one that I'm going to try and connect with other people who have other resources to say, hey, can you develop this and I want to be a part of it, or something along those lines.
That's a great question. I mean, I feel like I would be totally lying if I were to say that, I was in a position where I could just decide. A lot of times it's whatever gig comes through the door sometimes, and you're like,
Sure.
so thankful for the work, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I kind of feel like I definitely feel so passionate about family stuff for the most part, something that I feel like you can take all ages to. So, like an Avenue Q, I've gotten more adult things, which is fine. But I think I've always felt this want to create work that is accessible to all ages, because I feel like we live in such a heavy demographic society where there's so much that's created for only preschool, or so much that's created for only preteens, or so much that's created only for adults. There's so few things that you can sit down and watch and someone will get something out. Every age group gets something out of it, which I just feel really passionate about. So I think that's part of what defines it. I was lucky. I had such a great childhood. I mean, like all kids, my parents got divorced. There were difficult moments in my life, but I think of a very happy young person when I think about my childhood, and so much of that was because of my exposure to the Muppets and Fraggles and Sesame Street and Kids Incorporated and all these shows that made me happy as a kid and inspired me. And so I think I want to keep that going. I want to keep inspiring the next generation, and I want it to be. And what I remember about the Muppets or Fraggle Rock or anything like that is that my family would sit down and watch it with me. There was such a I remember my dad really walking in while I was watching Fraggle Rock right when I first kind of started becoming obsessed with it. But I remember it was an episode that was one of the deeper episodes that they did about one of the heavier subjects. And I remember my dad coming in and sitting down and just kind of being like, "What is my son watching?" I'm sure that's what he was thinking. And he was like, and I remember him sitting there like watching for like a good 10 minutes and going, "Hey, this is really good." and then laughing at like something that like the Doozers did, and he was like, because it was like some sort of a reference. Of course, I wouldn't have gotten as a kid. My dad kind of got, and he was like, and I was like, I just that memory is so powerful to me, and I'm like, and when you're a kid and you're watching your parents enjoy something you're enjoying, that's such a bonding moment, So I think that's kind of to go back to your. I'm rambling. I think that's answering your question. That like I think I try to look for stuff like that I feel like will. I mean, I know it's so cliche and corny, but it's that I think it's the same. I want to keep that same idea of what Jim Henson looked for, which was like things that are going to leave the world a little bit better. And I think that's I think that's our responsibility as creators and artists is to make stuff that. Yes, sometimes you need to make some money. Sometimes you need to make that commercial thing. But when you are given the opportunity to make something that does good, I think that's hopefully, what I like to try to look for that.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's incredible? Do you feel like there are, you mentioned, being inspired by entertainment that sort of reaches across demographics and different age groups. Do you feel like there are specific qualities that make something more likely to reach across an age group, or we reach to be able to communicate with kids and adults?
I think so. I think first of all, I think comedy, number one. Physical comedy or really situational comedy always reaches different ages, because I think that we're all kids inside, even as adults, and there's still something genuinely funny about, I don't know, mistaken identity or a pratfall or a pie to the face. I mean, all these like things that, it's like when you watch I Love Lucy now, which was filmed, 60 something years ago, and is in black and white and is very much a product of its time as far as the social conditions on the show. Sure. But you still laugh at it because it's just good comedy. It's such well done comedy. So I think comedy, I also think optimism, and I think anything where a character is looking for their purpose, or they're looking for their meaning, or they're looking for something greater, or if they're on a hero's journey, I think that we all can easily slot into that, whether it's the ideal version of what we wish our lives were, or it's something that we've gone through that we can relate to. I remember when I was doing Avenue Q, and people would say to me all the time, either, oh my gosh, I remember being 22 and wanting to find my reason for being, and I'm so glad I did. Or I have a very strong memory of a friend who came to see the show, who at the time was in his 50s, who said, I started sobbing during that song, during Purpose, because I realized I still don't even know what that is for me. So I think when you can find a universal theme or a feeling or a journey for a character, I think that makes it accessible to everybody.
Yeah. Did you want to?
We have a question from Africa.
Ooh.
Oh.
Highlight. And it
wow.
Like
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Well, that's great. How did Avenue Q come about? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about. It's a
crazy journey.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was really amazing. So I was working at Sesame Street at the time, and Jeff Marks, who was one of the composers of Avenue Q, was an intern in the music department at Sesame Street for a very short time. He did not have a great experience there, as he will tell in many stories. And he met Bobby Lopez. They were writing together. They were both very young, very talented writers and creators, and they met at I think it was the BMI Musical Theater Workshop. And they both shared a love for Muppets. And they loved the Muppet Show. They loved the Muppet movie. They loved all the Muppets. And they wanted to write a Muppet musical film. And they wrote something up. I think it was called Kermit, Prince of Denmark. Really funny bit. They submitted it. It didn't really get anywhere. And then they thought, well, hey, we should just write our own puppet stuff. So they decided to write an adult version of Sesame Street for TV that would kind of be like the lessons that you learn when you're in your 20s, but taught in a very Sesame Street children's television format, but as a television series. So it was not going to be a theater piece. It was going to be a TV show, kind of like a Comedy Central show. So, and they wrote like 4 or 5 songs and 4 or 5 skits. At the time, there was no through line. There was no, musical theater arc story. It was literally just like written like a half-hour episode of a TV show. And much like the old Sesame Street, where it's different now, but it used to be, if you remember the old Sesame Street, it would be, a little bit of like a 1-minute story on the street. And then they would go and do like 3 different inserts about the letter C. And then they come back to the street. Right. So it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
And so they needed puppeteers who could sing and act. And when I wasn't doing Sesame Street at the time, I was doing, off Broadway shows, and I was auditioning for things. And I think I did a kids theater tour around that time. So everyone at Sesame Street knew that I did musical theater too. And so I got this call from Laura McLean, who we all know and love, who's an amazing puppeteer, puppet builder, wrangler, everything. And she was working on the show, and she knew Jeff and Bobby and said, hey, do you know about this project? It sounds like something you would want to do. Yeah. I always forget. I don't remember if Rick Lyon called me, but somehow I got asked to do this night. They were going to do a reading of it. And if you don't know theater, a reading is basically where you literally read the show. You just kind of open up a book and read it. And even though it was a TV show, they were like, let's bring an audience just to see if people think this is going to be funny.
Yeah. So a good way to test out any of the timings or the jokes and like see what.
Yeah, because you're in front of people and much like a studio audience, like, is this going to land in front of a studio audience on TV? So, and I had something that night. I remember, I always tell the story to like young actors. I had like paid work for the night of this reading. I was like, I don't know if it was catering or what I was going to do, but I had something. And something, this flame light inside of me was like, you have to do this, you have to do the show. And so I literally said yes without even thinking. I was like, yes, I'm going to do it. Turned down the work, obviously the best decision I could have ever made. But I always say, listen to that little voice inside of you. There's a reason it talks to you. Anyway, so we go to the York Theater on the East Side. We do this presentation. We're just going to read these skits out loud and sing the songs. And we discussed right before. We're like, well, what do we do about the puppets? Because obviously on TV we'd hold it over our heads like this.
Yeah.
But it feels a little weird to do that for 2 hours or however long it was going to be for this performance. So we just kind of held them here next to us,
Sure.
And you have to remember, this had never really been done before, this kind of theater puppetry, television style. So we did the night. It was a huge success. People laughed. I still can remember how packed with laughter the theater was.
Yeah.
And they loved it. And very quickly it became apparent that people thought, this should definitely be a theater piece. Because it felt so good in a theater setting and it was musical, and that watching the puppeteers work was one of the most interesting things to people, which we take for granted, when we're on set and we're working. But it's like, oh yeah, I guess people don't understand how a right-handed puppet works or a double-hand puppet works, or oh yeah, I guess it's kind of cool to watch how we manipulate the rods to make them clap or make them. So all of a sudden it kind of took off from there. And so we did that reading, and then we did another reading and another reading and another reading. And it just kind of gained momentum. And then we did a big workshop up at the O'Neill Theater Center. And then I think 6 months later, we were off Broadway. And that was it. We thought, okay, we're going to get our 2-week run off Broadway. Oh my gosh, we made it. We did it. Never thinking that the show would sell out. Never thinking it would extend. I think it was 2 times. And certainly never thinking we were going to go to Broadway. And then we had a meeting with our producers and they said, we're going to go to Broadway. And there it was. So
that's it.
Yeah, Stephanie
That's really
DeBruzzo
cool.
and Ann Harada used to always call it the little show that could.
Yeah.
And it is kind of what it felt like. It felt like we were getting to go to the ball, and it couldn't get any better. So that's how it came to
Did you
be.
have a question you want to jump in?
Yeah, we've got a lot of amazing questions that are coming in, so I'm going to try to get to all of them.
I'll try not to talk to you. I tell long stories. I'm sorry.
I love it.
I think they're prompting more questions. So, okay, so this is another question that came in, which I just want to point out, this person has an amazing icon for their
I love that icon. I'm assuming that those are puppets you built, and if they are, they're beautiful. They're wonderful.
Yeah, I know the Mo Show a little bit. So the question is, what is it like working on the Fraggle Rock Apple TV show? This is the new series of Fraggle Rock On, which is filming now, I believe, right?
Well, so we filmed actually right here is literally where my blue screen goes. So
Amazing.
we filmed 6 shorts that were during the pandemic, the start of the pandemic, and they really were designed to basically just be, first of all, a great reason to bring the characters back, because the Fraggle characters haven't done a series all together, all 5 of them or all 6 of them if you count Traveling Matt since the original series. So that was exciting. But then it also felt like the right time because when we started shooting them, I think it was May, and it was right when the reality I think was hitting of we're going to be going through this for a while. And I think all of the newness of going through this had worn off, and everyone was starting to feel I still feel this way, emotionally on edge, because we can't be together and we can't see our family and our friends. So we thought that the characters, and Apple thought that the characters would be so great to show them, also kind of isolated, but learning how to still connect and learning how to still be together even when they're far apart. And we literally shot them, no lies, in our bedrooms and our living rooms with our loving partners and husbands and wives and boyfriends and girlfriends, helping. There's Gobo.
Amazing.
Assisting us, and through the magic of blue screen and the magic of beautiful iPhone 11s that Apple sent us, and our incredible editors and directors and everything, we were able to make a short form series. And so they went up, and they've been on the service, and they're amazing. And then we're actually right now we're in the process of pre-production for the long series, the reboot of Fraggle Rock, which is
that's great, so
incredibly surreal. And I count my blessings every single day, and I'm still not really believing it's happening. I'm kind of in shock. And,
well, sure. I mean, especially because this show is what got you into puppets in the first place.
Yeah, and the true story, this is the full circle thing, and I swear to God this is true, is that when I was a teenager and people would ask me, well, what's your dream job? Like, you know, you're a puppeteer, so what's your dream job? And I'd always say, well, it doesn't exist. And they say, what do you, or I say, it doesn't exist anymore. And they'd be like, what do you mean? And I'd say, well, it's over. And I'd always say, my dream would have been to have been born 20 years earlier and to have worked on Fraggle Rock. Like, that would have been my dream. And of course, the show had since been. So it's so bizarre and weird and full circle and amazing. And I'm a little scared that like this is the end of my life because I'm like, how could it
this is it, you peaked.
I'm like, after this, struck by lightning, because you know, it really is surreal to be doing it. But yeah, we're gonna shoot a brand new half-hour version of the show, and it's gonna be soon. So it's
cool.
Yeah. So if you're a Fraggle fan, really great things are coming. Yeah,
absolutely. Kid, you want to jump?
Yeah, there's another one from Rob Brown, who is in Carham Downs, Melbourne, Australia.
All right.
Ooh, I'm always
people from all over the world.
Worldwide, yeah.
Yes, I love it.
Thank you. Truly international.
Hi, Rob.
Yeah, great question. Where did the voices come from, and how do you approach that when you get a new character? How do you approach that vocal work?
You know what, I don't think there's any like real rule to it. You know, sometimes it's written out for you. Sometimes it's very specific. It'll say a really gruff voiced, angry guy, or, you know, a small puppet with a giant voice. Like, sometimes it's really spelled out for you in the character descriptions. But I was so lucky. My first few years at Sesame Street, I got to work with Jerry Nelson, and you know, who of course is a hero to all of us. And I got to really watch him. And I remember he did an interview or something while I was there. I remember him talking about it. I can't remember why he was talking about it. He was talking about his approach to finding voices, because of course he was known as, you know, the man of a million voices, and he did. That's kind of what he was used for, was as this performer that you could throw any character at and he'd make it funny and also give it this incredible personality and voice. And he would like look at the shape of the puppet, how big the mouth was, how the eyes were set, you know, how big of a head it had. If it was a scene with a bunch of other characters, you know, how that character fit in. He really took it in as a whole picture, that it wasn't just what sounded funny, but sometimes it was like, well, what does it look like this character would talk like, you know? And sometimes, you know, so between, you know, from Jerry, learning from Marty Robinson, from Kevin, from Carol Spinney, from all those guys, it was really sometimes about how it fits into a scene, you know? But the visual to me has always been a big part of it. Like, for sure, like if you get a character that's got like really wide eyes with teeny pupils and a big mouth, you just know that's going to be a loud character, and probably going to have a higher voice. Or, you know, if you get a character that looks really sleepy looking and maybe with like kind of a droopy mouth, you know, he's probably going to talk like this. So you just, I think you just kind of go off of the visual and just what the character does in the scene, you know? And sometimes it's surprising people. You know, I did Elmo, Cinderelmo, that like Cinderella version of Elmo. Nice. And I remember Kevin gave me, you know, like a little one-shot character. And he's got like a ticket, and he was one of those little what we call AMs, anything Muppets, like the Prairie Dawn size puppets. And he was teeny little guy, and had this fun nose. And I was doing this high voice at first. I was like, I think my line was like, I got number one, I got number one, I got number one. And then I forget who said, they're like, try like a really low, like bass voice for it, this guy. And it totally was it was so right, because it's like, you did not expect this little teeny guy to have a voice like this. And it was funny. So sometimes it's just like what works for the scene. But yeah. That's awesome. I hope that answered it. I'm sorry.
That's great. That's great. Do you feel like I'm always, I mean, the follow-up question for me is that, you know, I also do a bunch of different character voices for a bunch of different puppets. Do you ever feel like you only have like 3 voices and they're only just variations? It's like, oh yeah, that's that other character. Oh yeah, that just sounds like that other character. And how do you keep from it being just those 3?
You know what? It's funny because I remember when I was younger in my career, like I didn't get a lot of characters at first, and I was really hurt by that. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not a good enough actor. I'm just not good enough. And what I realized was I was so voice fearful that I would kind of revert to the same 1 or 2 voices all the time. And I just didn't have that confidence yet. And I started thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have a variety. But then as I got older, I realized, like, you know, it's not just having a variety. It's tailoring it to the character. And I think to myself of like Jim Henson, you know, like Jim only really had 3 or 4 voices if you really think about it. Like Ernie's pretty much in the same bracket as Kermit. Rolf is pretty much in the same bracket as, you know, Dr. Teeth. But it was the character behind that voice that made it feel different. I mean, it never even occurred to me when I was a kid that you know, Rolf and Dr. Teeth have pretty much the same voice, because you know who Rolf is as a character is so different from who Dr. Teeth is.
Exactly.
So I think I think that's part of it, but I also find that it's just, you never stop experimenting. You know, like you never stop challenging yourself. But I think we all like, let's be honest, I think we have like our 3 or 4 comfort voices that we go to.
For sure.
And then maybe you kind of build off of that. But yeah, I was like a late bloomer when it came to voices. That was like the last piece of I think my puppetry equation that really I started to find.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you feel like gaining recognition for your work changes the expectations that you put on yourself, or or the work that you do? How do you feel that changes how you approach your work?
I mean, I think I don't feel that way necessarily as a puppeteer, and I don't really necessarily. I feel that way as a comedic performer. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like some of my worst auditions I've ever had in my entire life were walking in after Avenue Q, because you know, when you see someone in an ideal situation in a show that they've spent 5 or 6 years being part of the development, and that character's been tailored to them, and you know, I was so blessed to be nominated for a Tony Award, which puts you in an amazing, you know, opens new doors for you. And then to walk into auditions that were comedic character auditions and like bomb them, be awful, you know, because we all have bad days and not everything is going to work out for us. I think the expectations were it was even worse than if I just come in off the street, because it was kind of like, why did he get nominated for a Tony Award? Like I can almost feel like people like, oh, what a mistake that was. So you get in your head. I mean, I'm my own worst enemy. You know, I feel like what's that RuPaul phrase where she's like, don't be your own worst saboteur. And I feel like that's definitely what every artist has. And I think when you finally get to do something amazing that has a little bit of notoriety, then you feel like you're always challenging yourself, and you're putting yourself in a position where if you don't land everything, then therefore you're a failure. So I have imposter syndrome all the time. I feel so I did a show a while ago that, you know, I completely psyched myself out of. I mean, luckily I just at the last minute kind of figured it out, but I really psyched myself out of, and I would go to bed almost crying every night, feeling like I'm not funny anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. And I think it's important to talk about that, because I think that we see people that are lucky to be successful, and then we think, oh, they've got it made. They're totally confident now. They know how to do everything. And the reality is, I still feel like I'm the new kid in the room. I still feel like I'm, you know, even when we're doing these Fraggle Rock On pieces, you know, we do like the cast read-throughs, and I'm on Zoom with Dave Goles and Karen Prell and, you know, my heroes. And I'd been playing Gobo for a few years, and I still would get like nervous, and I would like say a line and be like, oh, that was awful. Like it's amazing how much even the people who've been given the most opportunities, we still question ourselves. And I think honestly, I think that's good. Yeah. I think it makes us work harder, you know, and I think I've worked with people who think they're amazing and will let you know that they think they're amazing, and that's not good. So maybe you know, maybe the anxiety is a good
I feel like it always ends up with me. For me, it always ends up connecting me stronger to other people, because the only thing I can do is rely on other people to help, to just not even to just say, oh yeah, you're still good, or oh yeah, like not necessarily that, but just to like be there with me and to like be in a good company.
That's the best work in the world. You know,
it really lets me get through it, you know?
Yeah. And I think working in a vacuum is really boring. You know, I mean, I've done a lot of solo stuff and it's great, but like, I love the spirit of a bunch of talented people who share different talents, you know, that we all come from different places, just being together and seeing what comes of it and creating. There's something magical about that. and I will say this, I think that, you know, when I've gotten to do classes or give speeches, or I don't know, just like advice to people, especially younger generations, I always say, you know, there's no such thing as a one man or one woman show. Because even if you are the only person on stage, someone still has to open up the theater to let you in. Someone still has to run the lights. Someone still has to run the sound. Someone still has to focus the spotlights. So you're always depending on everyone else to help bring your art to life. So you have to remember that. You have to remember that you're never the most important person in the room. We're always connecting all together. We're always serving our different purposes. And I think it's so important to remember that. And there's people in this business that are super talented, but if your ego walks in the room before you, that's going to hurt you, you know, and you have to always be grateful and thankful and realize that, you know, you're there because someone wanted you to be there. It's not because, you know, it's just, I think it's easy to get caught up in the age of selfies and finding my brand and just, you know, this kind of, you know, unavoidably narcissistic culture we live in, where it's all about me and I and iPhone and I everything, that we have to remember that it's art is collaborative, and art is basically, it's made for an audience. Yeah. So anyway,
I couldn't agree more. So are there other audience questions I have one other question that I want to ask. We're like towards the end, but you know, you and I both know that like making a career out of your passion is super rewarding, but it also, you are making your job, you're making your day job, and that it's often a job. Yeah. How do you find, like, how do you manage balancing between the things you need to do with the things you want to do?
That's hard, you know, and it's funny. I think when I was younger, I had it in my head that if I didn't do the things that I was supposed to do all the time, that I wasn't working hard enough. And I denied myself a lot of the hobbies or the things or the work that just brought me joy, that maybe wouldn't really lead to anything, but just made myself happy, you know, whether that's building a puppet, which I've never been great at, but I love the process of, or singing a song because I want to sing that song, not because someone's waiting for me to sing it. So as I've gotten older, I've learned to really try to find that mix. I also think, you know, I try not to only do one thing, you know, which which might be why I drink a lot of coffee, but to keep myself going. But I think it's important to have different interests and different avenues. And I have been lucky that when I'm, you know, if there's not a puppet show I can work on, you know, physically, I can be writing. Or if I'm not writing, then I can be performing. And if I'm not performing, I could be, you know, speaking or whatever. Like, I think it's important to never deny yourself the ability to try something new. You know, as an artist, whether you're an actor or a singer or not a dancer, as we talked about at the beginning, that when you get an opportunity to try something, to not psych yourself out because you're so single, you know, tunnel focused on something. Like I got into voiceovers, you know, which ended up being really successful for me to do, you know, on the side, which I don't mean it on the side, but what I mean is it's not my main focus. But for years, I got to do a commercial campaign where I was the voice of a character for Kmart. And honestly, during very difficult times theatrically or very difficult times television and film, that paid my bills, you know, and I also learned a whole new art form. And so, that came from me saying, yeah, sure, I'll try for that. You know, it would have been very easy to say, oh, I don't do that, you know, and I think we do that as artists. We get scared to say, oh, I don't do that. You know, like if you're a TV performer and someone offers you to do theater, just because you've never done it before, they see the potential in you. They see that you could maybe do it. So why deny yourself that? And who knows, it could end up being what pays the bills for the next few years. So I think it's important to always be open to that. And like, I'm not a dancer, but I go to dance class and I love dancing. You know what I mean? And I want to keep learning how to be a dancer. You know, I'm never going to be necessarily in a chorus line, but you know what? Being able to move well, thank goodness, because I wouldn't have been able to do the stuff I did as Pinocchio and Shrek. Like, you have to learn how to, I think you just have to keep your mind open because it will surprise you. If you had told me that I would be in Los Angeles now writing and directing and producing, I would have thought you were crazy. You know what I mean? But it was the opportunities that I let come to me. So you have to just you have to keep that open path. Like, keep your eye on, where you want to end up at the end of the road, but don't be afraid to kind of do this to get there. It's super important. It's super important.
Yeah. You might even say there's a lot of avenues. And if I were to letter them, at least avenues A through, I don't know, S, probably.
You're fired. You're fired. You're absolutely fired.
The show's almost over.
He's just like he's like, okay, let me see, how can I tie that in?
I saw that one percolating for a while. I don't know if
believe it or not, though, that's actually not, like, you'd be surprised. If you had said, well, there's a very fine line, I would have been like, Eric. But that one, actually, I didn't see it coming. I did not see it coming.
All right. Well, going for the low-hanging fruit. That's my style. Well, with that, I want to say thank you again so much for being on the show. It's really great to talk about what you know about, and it's
I just want to take a second and say thank you, because I really think it's so important right now that, like, giving people a way to learn more about puppetry and connect, and not just about puppeteering itself, but also how we all got here, what we do. Like, thank you for having a home for that, and for creating that, and for you took the time to perfect example. You came up with this, and you did this, and you actually made it happen. So thank you for creating that.
Well, I appreciate that.
It's important.
It's really great having you on the show, and I can't wait to see you again. I can't wait to our next project, or whatever that might be, and all the best to you and in your next ventures. I can't wait to see the new Fraggle Rock. It's going to be amazing.
Yes, it's so exciting. I wish I could talk more about it. I want to tell you guys everything about it, but I'm not allowed to. But it's going to be super cool.
Well, maybe we'll do a follow-up after it comes out.
Let's do it.
We'll do another thing.
Deal.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Well, that wraps up another show with Puppet Time Online. Thank you so much for watching. We're all on these streaming platforms now, so like and subscribe on YouTube, and you'll be sure to catch all of our next episodes. We're on the air every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. That's right in the middle of the week, right in the middle of the middle. And you can find us.
Not if you're in Melbourne.
Not if you're in Melbourne or Africa.
Africa, which was really cool.
That was pretty great. You can check out our Square site to pick up some PK merch. Katie's scrolling that across the screen. You can visit us at puppetkitchen.com, on Instagram, where we started this show, at the Puppet Kitchen. I got two quick shout outs. One is a podcast that I really like, which is the Scaredy Cats Horror Show, which is two podcasters from a show called Reply All, where one of them doesn't like scary movies, and the other one is sort of getting them to watch scary movies and sort of weaning them into the world of scary movies. And they talk all about each episode. And for me, this is a really great podcast about confronting your fears. And I think right now it's an excellent time because it's Halloween, and this is the season of staring your fears straight in the face, and
in more ways than one.
In more ways than one. Jeez. But I think that's the way that it's a really important thing to do. My mom was always super into Halloween because it was a time to talk about and to like confront fear. And I think that's really important. I think it's a really important thing to do, and to like dive right into it. Maybe unrelated, voting is open right now, and early voting in New York especially is open. If you're registered to vote, and
you're in the U.S.
If you're in the U.S. for U.S. elections, which are really super important, everybody is invited to vote. You should vote. If you have questions about it, go to vote.org, and you can see if you're registered. You can see where your polling places are. You should do it. And that's the show. I want to thank you again for being here. One more big thanks to my guest, John Tartaglia. And until next time, just remember, you don't have to do everything to do something. We'll see you next time.